This is Marley Cox presenting my work for the Great Moments in Art Education project. For this project, I chose Roy Lichtenstein. I knew a little bit about Lichtenstein and the pop art movement going into this, but through my research, I found out a lot more about Lichtenstein's life that I did not already know. Roy Fox Lichtenstein was born in 1923 in New York City. Roy and his sister were lucky to grow up in a home with a mother who introduced them to art at a very early age, taking them to museums, concerts, and other displays of art and culture in New York City. Roy started displaying a talent for art and music at a very early age, drawing, painting, sculpting as a teenager, and spending a lot of days in the American Museum of Natural History and the Museum of Modern Art. Growing up in a private education in New York City, Lichtenstein was able to grow in his talents and study at the Art Students League of New York with Reginald Marsh. He then went on to the College of Education at Ohio State University in Columbus. During his undergrad, he began to object the notion that one person's drawings could be considered brilliant and someone else's that may have even looked better was considered nothing by almost everyone. This thought was encouraged by one of his teachers, Hoyt L. Sherman, who Lichtenstein says was the person who showed him how to think about art and whose perception-based approach shaped his own ideas and principles. During this time at Ohio State, World War II broke out and Lichtenstein was drafted. He kept drawing throughout the conflict, and when the war was over, he traveled to Paris. After leaving Paris in 1946, he returned to Ohio State to complete his bachelor's in fine arts and was soon invited to join the faculty as an instructor while he attained his master's. He furthered his friendship with his mentor, Hoyt Sherman, and taught Sherman's methods in his own classes. In 1950, his contract with Ohio State was not renewed, and for the next few years, even though he was not teaching, he was refining his artistic style. In 1957, he accepted a job with the State University of New York. The change of scenery to New York also turned into a change in his artistic style. He moved away from representation in his art and into more of an abstract style, while at the same time placing iconic pop culture characters in expressionistic backgrounds. During this time, Lichtenstein met a new mentor and friend in Reginald Neal, who was the head of the art department at Douglas College. Neal was expanding the studio art program and hired Lichtenstein in 1960. During his time at Douglas College, Roy's art thrived and his now famous style was becoming more clearly defined. At the time that Roy was coming into his own style and making a splash in the art world, the works of similar artists were also emerging. Those of Andy Warhol, George Segal, and Jim Dine, many others. Collectively, their work was seen as, quote, a slap in the face to abstract expressionism. In 1964, he resigned from his teaching job and began focusing solely on his art, branching out into printmaking and sculpture. His career was built on imitation by borrowing images from comic books and advertisements, then later encompassing everything from everyday objects to art styles and even art history itself. Their style collectively was becoming a movement on modern art that challenged the traditions of fine art by including imagery from popular culture, more commonly known as pop art. Pop art is now defined as art based on modern popular culture and the mass media, especially as a critical or iconic movement on traditional fine art values. Roy Lichtenstein is considered one of the most influential and innovative artists of the 20th century. He's identified with pop art, a movement he helped originate. His paintings reinvigorated the American art scene and changed the history of modern art. As a pioneer in the movement of pop art, Lichtenstein challenged students and viewers of his work to question what they were seeing. Several critics said that he was a plagiarist and they were not impressed by his basic painting techniques, but in a way that was kind of the point of his work. Motivated by his early education and questioning why some art was considered good and some was not, was a part of what pushed his art and his want to create something new. In my opinion, we can essentially thank Lichtenstein for being a part of what we know today as modern art and for being a key player in creating a new history in art, all while being an educator and pouring into the lives and minds of future artists.